Only months before November in 1996, a young woman had been on stage in a tiny club called Blues Alley in Washington, D.C., belting out standards and folk songs with the purity of an angel. But not long after that, she passed away. Her name was Eva Cassidy. In life, she never sought the spotlight, never inked a big record deal, and never built the sort of brand that sells out stadiums. Yet, in death, her voice would captivate millions, transcending borders and genres in a way that took everyone by surprise, even her. How did the world miss a talent so luminous until it was too late? And why did it take her passing to reveal the rare gift she carried? Eva Marie Cassidy was born on February 2, 1963, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., an area that's sometimes overshadowed by national politics and big city bustle. Her family lived in Maryland, on the outskirts of the city, where neighborhoods shifted from busy streets to quieter tree-lined roads. Eva's father was a teacher and sculptor, her mother a homemaker, and together they raised Eva and her siblings in an environment that encouraged creativity. The Cassidy household was modest but filled with music and art. Her dad played the violin and also taught the children various instruments. The family often sang together, turning simple gatherings into impromptu performances. Early on, Eva displayed a remarkable ear for melody. By the time she was in elementary school, she could pick up harmonies with ease, and her siblings recall that her voice stood out even in casual, everyday singing. Despite her innate talent, Eva was notably shy, a soft-spoken girl who preferred painting in her room to socializing in large groups. She had a tenderness about her that made her a good listener and a loyal friend. But her introverted nature also meant she was never the child pushing to be center stage. When asked what she wanted to do with her life, Eva would shrug and say, "I'd just like to sing." Her earliest public singing experiences came through school choirs and small local events. Each time people took notice, "That Cassidy girl has such a pure voice," they'd say. Yet Eva remained unfazed by the praise. It wasn't that she disliked performing. She simply didn't crave the attention it brought. If anything, applause and public compliments made her uncomfortable. She'd blush, say thank you, and retreat to her paints and easel. By her teenage years, she had developed a strong interest in visual arts, spending hours sketching landscapes, animals, and anything else that caught her eye. That artistic eye, many believe, was closely tied to her musical sense, a kind of heightened sensitivity to color, tone, and nuance that would later define her vocal style. Around the age of 16, Eva picked up a guitar in earnest, teaching herself chords and strumming patterns while humming gentle tunes. She gravitated to folk and pop standards, the kind of simple, heartfelt music that told stories without too much fuss. She also listened to jazz singers like Ella Fitzgerald and gospel legends like Mahalia Jackson, absorbing their techniques and emotional depth. It was never about replicating them note for note. She simply gleaned little lessons about phrasing, timing, and how a voice could float effortlessly across a melody. On top of that, she tried her hand at everything from rock to country. Not out of ambition to be a superstar, but out of curiosity. She seemed to have a playful desire to see where her voice could go without the constraints of genre labels. In her early 20s, Eva started to play with local bands, mostly in the D.C. and Maryland area. Friends coaxed her onto small stages, open mics, and casual jam sessions. It wasn't unusual to find her singing a folk tune one minute and switching to a Motown classic the next. Yet each time, the audience was struck by the same phenomenon. Eva Cassidy wasn't just singing, she was inhabiting each song, pouring a quiet but profound soul into every note. She rarely introduced songs with long stories or banter. She just let the music speak. Word spread slowly among local musicians that there was a woman with a near miraculous voice in the scene, but she seemed uninterested in chasing bigger gigs. Around 1992, Eva's name began to surface in local clubs and among music aficionados. She was the singer who refused to be pinned down. Jazz? Sure, she'd knock out a standard with a silky, effortless tone. Folk ballads? She delivered them with a heartbreaking sincerity as though she'd lived each story herself. Blues? She could dig in and make a moaning guitar line echo the pain in her voice. People tried to sign her to small record labels or manage her career. Each time, discussions hit a snag when they insisted she pick a single genre. Marketing was, and still is, based on neat boxes. Are you a jazz singer or a folk singer? Are you a gospel artist or a pop artist? They wanted an angle. She wanted no part of it. A local producer once told her, "Eva, if you just stick to jazz, we can make you the next big thing." She politely declined, telling him she didn't want to be molded into something for the sake of sales. Another label insisted she perform only country or only adult contemporary. Again, she refused. To her, music was about exploring feelings and styles freely. She didn't see a reason to pick just one path. The result was that these potential deals fell through, leaving her with a small but devoted following rather than a national audience. Eva herself never complained. She had a day job landscaping. Gardening was another of her passions. And she sang in the evenings for whoever cared to listen. By the mid-1990s, Eva was performing regularly at clubs around Washington, D.C. She didn't command huge crowds, but those who showed up often became instant fans. They'd hear her deliver a cover of Sting's Fields of Gold, and the next minute, she'd transition seamlessly into Wade in the Water, a gospel-inspired piece. She'd follow that with an old folk tune or a jazz standard, each rendered with the same luminous sincerity. She had a special knack for reinterpreting well-known songs in a way that made you feel as though you were hearing them for the first time. People left her shows quietly stunned, sometimes moved to tears without fully knowing why. In early 1996, a tiny window of opportunity opened. Eva decided to record a live album at Blues Alley, a small but iconic jazz club in the heart of Georgetown. It was an intimate setting, perfect for her style, a chance to capture her voice in its most natural form, unvarnished and unedited. The resulting record, Live at Blues Alley, was recorded over 2 nights, though they ended up using mostly the second night's performances. The album featured her takes on classics like Bridge Over Troubled Water, Stormy Monday, and a breathtaking version of Over the Rainbow. Funding was limited. They had to do everything quickly and cheaply, but still the essence of Eva's voice came through. This live record would turn out to be the only official album she released during her lifetime. In Washington, D.C., the album stirred some excitement among local fans. But beyond that circle, it barely made a ripple. She lacked the marketing muscle of a big label, so the record didn't land on mainstream charts or national radio. Eva's reaction was characteristically humble. She was simply happy that the performance had been preserved. She might have hoped for more opportunities in the future, but she didn't let the slow sales discourage her. She told friends she'd keep singing whether she sold 10 records or 10,000. Unbeknownst to Eva, a storm was gathering inside her body. By mid-1996, she began experiencing severe pain in her hip. She brushed it off at first, blaming her landscaping job for the aches and pains. But the discomfort grew, and soon it became impossible to ignore. Doctors initially suspected a fracture or a muscle problem. Then the real diagnosis came crashing down. Eva had bone cancer, and it had already spread to her lungs, to other parts of her body. There was talk of treatments, but the outlook was grim. The cancer was advanced, and her doctors explained that her time was likely short. For someone who had avoided the spotlight all her life, Eva now faced the ultimate test in silence. She didn't hold press conferences, didn't dramatize her ordeal. Close friends and family were aware, of course, and they rallied around her, hoping for a miracle. But Eva seemed to sense the inevitable. A quiet acceptance settled over her, though it wasn't without sadness. She told a dear friend, "I just wish I had more time to paint, to sing a bit more." Rather than dwelling on what might have been, she turned her remaining energy toward recording a few final songs. She wanted to leave something behind, some trace of her gift. These late recordings included What a Wonderful World, Autumn Leaves, and a mesmerizing version of Christine McVie's Songbird. Each track bore the stamp of Eva's unique vocal purity, but there was also a poignant fragility in her voice, as though she were pouring out whatever remained of her strength into every note. She was in pain, often exhausted from the cancer ravaging her body, yet she managed to channel that suffering into performances so moving that anyone who hears them today can't help but feel they're glimpsing the soul of a person at the edge of life. By October of 1996, Eva could no longer perform in public. The cancer had spread rapidly, and simple tasks became a struggle. She withdrew to her home in Bowie, Maryland, surrounded by her parents, siblings, and a handful of close friends. They offered comfort, read to her, prayed with her, and sometimes even played her own recordings to lift her spirits. She found solace in small gestures, fresh flowers, a warm blanket, a quiet moment by the window. One day, a friend brought her a guitar, but Eva could barely lift it. She smiled softly, acknowledging that her time for making music in this world was nearly over. Eva Cassidy passed away on November 2nd, 1996, in the peaceful surroundings of her childhood home. She was 33 years old. It was a quiet departure, fitting for someone who had spent her life avoiding fanfare. Her funeral was attended by family and a few close companions from the local music scene. They spoke of her kindness, her laughter, her humility, and the music that, at least in their circle, had been cherished for years. There were no headlines in the national press, no outpouring of tributes from major celebrities. In the broader music industry, her death passed unnoticed. But the story didn't end there. In the years that followed, a few of her friends began organizing Eva's tapes and unreleased recordings. They compiled her most striking songs into a posthumous album called Songbird, which was released in 1998. Initially, it did about as well as any small indie release: modest sales, a bit of local airplay, some attention among niche music fans. Nobody could have guessed what would happen next. In 1999, a BBC radio presenter in the UK happened upon Eva's rendition of Over the Rainbow. The broadcaster was so moved by it that he played it on air, sharing Eva's voice with an unsuspecting British audience. Listeners called in droves asking, "Who is this singer? Where can we hear more?" The station replayed the track multiple times. Soon, other BBC programs caught wind of this remarkable performance, and Over the Rainbow began to spread across Britain like wildfire. Within months, Songbird started selling rapidly, first in the UK, then across Europe. By early 2000, Eva Cassidy had become a phenomenon overseas, topping charts she never even knew existed. Eric Clapton spoke of her voice with awe. Paul McCartney and Sting both referred to her as one of the greatest voices they'd ever heard. Adele mentioned Eva Cassidy as a key influence. Across genres, whether it was pop, folk, jazz, or blues, artists began praising her artistry. It seemed almost surreal that such universal admiration would arrive only after her passing. One British critic wrote, "Eva Cassidy stands among the purest voices of the modern era, yet she never lived to hear the echoes of her brilliance. Suddenly, Eva's grave in Maryland became a site of quiet pilgrimage. Fans who discovered her music years after her death would leave flowers, notes, and messages of gratitude. Some wrote letters describing how her versions of Fields of Gold or Autumn Leaves helped them through grief or hardship. It was as if Eva's voice reached beyond the finality of death, offering comfort and hope to people who'd never met her. In a music industry fixated on stardom, she emerged as a new kind of legend, the singer who became a global icon without ever courting fame. Several documentaries followed, each painting a fuller picture of Eva's life. They interviewed her family members, who described a sensitive soul, who loved to paint birds and flowers, who found immense joy in simple things. They spoke to bandmates who recalled her gentle but perfectionist approach in rehearsals. They also touched on her shyness, the stage fright that sometimes kept her from performing, and her reluctance to sign any deal that might limit her freedom to explore different musical styles. Perhaps her posthumous rise resonated so deeply because it was completely unmanufactured, an organic discovery propelled by the sheer power of her voice. Yet for many of those closest to Eva, there was an undercurrent of sadness in her belated fame. They wished she could have seen the outpouring of love firsthand, to realize that her dream of sharing music without the trappings of celebrity did come true in the end. At the same time, they recognized that her humility would have remained intact. Eva never sought the big stage, so who's to say she would have been entirely comfortable with global recognition? Some friends imagined her feeling embarrassed by the attention, though surely grateful that people found solace in her songs. It's worth considering why Eva Cassidy's voice touched such a universal chord. Part of it lies in her refusal to be bound by a single genre. She let the song itself guide her interpretation, infusing each piece with an emotional honesty that transcended style. When she sang Over the Rainbow, it wasn't a Broadway belter's showpiece. It was a tender, almost whispered dream of a better place, sung by someone who quietly believed in the possibility of magic, even in a broken world. When she covered Sting's Fields of Gold, she gave it a warm glow, like a summer sunset you never want to end. Every phrase felt personal, as though she were confiding in the listener. Over the years, many lesser-known details have emerged. Bandmates recalled how she'd fret over a single note, wanting it to be just right, and how she'd often refused to go on stage if she didn't feel her voice was up to par. She believed that if she couldn't give the audience everything she had, it was better not to perform at all. There's a story of her walking off a potential label meeting because an executive made a passing remark about her weight, suggesting she might need a healthier image for marketing. Eva was stunned by the shallowness of it all. She politely ended the meeting and left, never to return. Another friend tells of a time they were driving in the countryside, and Eva suddenly asked to pull over. She'd spotted a field of sunflowers and wanted to sketch them. They spent nearly an hour there, her scribbling away in a notebook, humming tunes under her breath, totally absorbed in the moment. This was Eva Cassidy at her core, someone who found wonder in ordinary, overlooked corners of life. You can hear that wonder in her voice, that sense that every moment, every note deserves to be fully felt. In the United States, shows like Nightline or 2020 profiled her, pointing out the paradox of a singer becoming famous when she was no longer around to enjoy it. They interviewed her parents who, amid their grief, expressed gratitude that the world was finally hearing their daughter's voice. They revealed that even as a child, Eva had a certain sadness in her eyes, as though she recognized how fragile life could be. By the early 2000s, Eva's posthumous status as a modern music icon was solid. Her albums continued to sell. Younger artists discovered her, took inspiration from her approach, and attempted to emulate that effortless sincerity. Adele once mentioned listening to Eva as a teenager and feeling that Fields of Gold was a masterclass in emotional expression. Vocal coaches on YouTube produced countless React videos, marveling at the clarity and control in Eva's performances. Each year, new fans stumbled upon her name, drawn in by someone praising her on social media or encountering Over the Rainbow in a random playlist. One particularly touching story involves a British couple who wrote to Eva's family, explaining that they'd lost their child to illness around the same time Eva passed. They came across her music by chance and found it so comforting that they played Songbird at their child's memorial service. They felt that, in some mysterious way, Eva's voice helped them grieve and heal. The family wrote back, thanking them and sharing in their sorrow. In that exchange, you see the real power of Eva Cassidy's artistry. It transcended performance and marketing, landing straight in the realm of human connection. By the time we reach the end of Eva Cassidy's story, a few things become clear. She was an artist who placed authenticity above all else. She never pretended to be anyone she wasn't. She refused to reduce her music to a single style or cater to industry norms. Her life was short, marred by a tragic illness that cut her down just as she was hitting her stride. And yet, her legacy has grown into something extraordinary, an inspiration for generations of singers, a comfort for listeners who stumble upon her music at critical moments in their lives, a shining example of how pure talent can find its way even without a commercial machine behind it. Thank you for taking the time to remember Eva Cassidy with me. If her songs have ever touched your heart, or if you're only just discovering them, I encourage you to share your own thoughts or memories. Eva might be gone from this earth, but in the notes she left behind, her spirit still soars like a quiet, unwavering songbird, reminding us that beauty can be found in the simplest, most authentic moments of life.